long-lost city filled with the skeletons of people who died for one unknown reason, giant red-haired cave dwellers burned alive in the Nevada desert, and an entire empire reduced to ash by a mysterious queen. These are lost civilizations that still terrify archaeologists. If you head to the border of modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, you'll find the ruins of a society that was essentially living in the future 4,000 years ago. These people didn't just build huts, they built massive cities like Mohenjo-Daro, a place with organized street grids, multi-story brick houses, and a drainage system so advanced it wouldn't be matched in Europe for another 3,000 years. They had public baths, they traded, and had their own writing system that to this day no one's been able to decode. Alright, but the creepy part. When archaeologists started digging into Mohenjo-Daro in the 1920s, they found groups of skeletons lying in what used to be the busy streets of the city. What happened to them? Were they soldiers? Well, no. They were families, and there were no signs that the people had died violently. No sword hacks or arrowheads stuck in their ribs or anything, so what happened to all of them? The leading theory is a sudden outbreak of something like malaria or cholera, but we can't say for sure. What we do know is that if there were survivors, they left in a hurry, because they didn't even stop to bury their dead. In the northern highlands of Ethiopia, there was once a kingdom called Aksum. It was so rich and powerful, the Roman Empire considered it one of the 4 greatest nations on the planet. It controlled the trade routes between the Mediterranean and India, and they spent all that wealth on some of the most insane stonework ever seen. They carved what are called stelae, these giant granite towers cut from a single block of stone. The biggest one, the Great Stela, stood over 100 feet tall and weighed about 500 tons. But then, around the 7th century, the empire started shrinking. They stopped minting their famous gold coins, abandoned their ports, and retreated into the mountains. But why? Well, one story blames a queen named Gudit. According to the legend, she was a nasty ruler who went on this violent rampage against Aksum, burning and destroying pretty much everything in her path. Archaeologists have actually found huge layers of ash from that time, along with signs that the damage was done on purpose. Someone tore down the massive stone towers and burned libraries to the ground. Nobody knows for sure if Gudit was a real person or just a kind of symbol of some massive rebellion, but either way, Aksum basically disappeared into the dark for centuries. 6,000 years ago, in what's now Ukraine, Romania, and Moldova, a group of people built mega sites that were easily the biggest settlements on the planet at the time. These cities could hold upwards of 15,000 people, and for the time, that was a lot. But they had a strange ritual. For whatever reason, every 60 to 80 years, the entire population would pack up their things, grab torches, and intentionally burn their entire city to the ground. Every single house and temple was turned into a massive bonfire. Excavations at sites like Talgenki show that these fires were so hot that the clay walls actually fused into a ceramic-like glass. This wasn't an accident or an attack. Again, it was deliberate, and they did this for 2,000 years straight. Then around 3000 BCE, the cycle stopped. They didn't leave a new city behind. They burnt the last one down and just walked away. There are tons of theories as to why they did this. Some researchers think they were trying to kind of cleanse the land after plagues kept coming back up, but it's impossible to say for sure. Nan Madol is a city of 92 artificial islands built on a coral reef off the coast of Pohnpei in Micronesia. It's built out of thousands of massive basalt columns that were stacked like logs to form walls. Some of these stones weigh up to 50 tons, and they were quarried on the opposite side of the island before being moved onto a reef in the middle of the ocean. They did all of this without wheels, metal tools, or pulleys, but the total weight of the stone used, only about 750,000 tons. Legend says the city was also run by rulers who used its isolation to keep a pretty tight, almost terrifying control over everyone who lived there. With no fresh water and no way to grow food on the reef, everything had to come in by boat. That meant the rulers could starve out anyone who stepped out of line. Even today, it's said that at night the spirits of the workers who died during the construction still haunt the ruins. Deep in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, as well as parts of the Sahara, geologists have come across something kind of weird. There are huge areas where the sand has been melted into sheets of green glass, a substance called trinitite. Usually, you only see this when sand is hit by a direct lightning strike or a massive meteorite, but in these specific spots in the Gobi, there are no impact craters, no iron from space, and the glass is spread out over miles in a way that you just wouldn't get with lightning. Eerily, this glass is identical to what was found at the Trinity test site in New Mexico after the first atomic bomb was detonated in 1945. So this has led to decades of theories, including ancient technology conspiracies. Mainstream science leans more towards something like a meteor airburst, where a space rock explodes in the sky with the force of a nuclear blast, but again, there's no clear trace of space debris in the glass. All we really know is that something happened in that desert thousands of years ago that generated enough heat to melt the Earth into glass. If you look at maps from the 16th and 17th centuries, you'll see a massive territory labeled Tartaria or Grand Tartary, stretching across Central Asia and Siberia. Now, most historians will tell you it's not some hidden empire. It was more like a loose catch-all name Europeans slapped on huge parts of Asia that they didn't really understand back then. Pretty boring explanation, honestly, but also one that actually holds up. Online, though, there's another theory. There's a whole corner of the internet that insists Tartaria wasn't just a map label, but a real, highly advanced civilization that got wiped out and erased from the history books. This is where things start to get pretty far-fetched, but interesting all the same. People have mentioned old buildings in Europe and parts of the USA, saying the architecture feels too grand and uniform to be coincidence. Some even go further and claim those big domes and spires weren't just decorative, but were actually some kind of free energy technology, like antennas pulling energy from the air. And there's the mud flood idea, which is probably the most famous part of this. They pointed to old buildings in cities like London and Moscow where the lower floors look half buried almost, like the street level rose up around them, and they argue there was some global event in the 1800s that buried an older civilization, and what we see now are just the upper parts of much larger buildings, with an entire civilization buried deep underground. There's an eerie story that in 1911, two miners were digging in a cave near Lovelock, Nevada, when they hit a layer of ancient debris. As they dug deeper, they found mummified remains that didn't look like any of the tribespeople in the area that they'd ever seen. Not only were they redheads, supposedly they were over 7 feet tall. It did turn out, however, that there were legends told by the local Paiute tribe about a group of red-haired giants called the Sidika, who were so aggressive and predatory that the tribes eventually banded together to trap them in that exact cave and burn them alive. But as the find gained fame, many of the original skeletons and artifacts were reportedly lost or taken into private collections, leaving only a few fragments in small museums. In 1986, in Sichuan province, China, workers came across two massive pits filled with thousands of bronze artifacts that have been buried for 3,000 years. These belong to the Sanxingdui culture, a society that left behind absolutely no written records. The creepiest and also coolest finds were these massive bronze masks with huge protruding eyes. They almost look like alien-type beings. They're unlike any other human faces found in ancient Chinese art, and they're really well made. The culture seemed to reach an incredible level of bronze working, but then just suddenly disappeared. But before they abandoned the site, they broke and burned all these priceless bronze masks and threw them into pits. It seemed deliberate. Again, we have no records to explain who they were, or what these wide-eyed faces were supposed to represent, or why they felt the need to burn and bury their entire culture. The Minoans lived on the island of Crete and were basically the most advanced people in the area during the Bronze Age. They had massive palaces like Knossos with actual plumbing and sophisticated art. They were mostly known for trading across the Mediterranean, but everything fell apart around 1450 BCE. Most people point to a volcano eruption at a nearby island, but there's a creepier element to the story than just a natural disaster. Inside the ruins at Knossos, archaeologists found evidence of human sacrifice in the very last layers of the site. They found a man on an altar, killed right as a massive earthquake was destroying the palace. These people were so desperate and panicked that they turned to human sacrifice to try and save themselves. Obviously, it didn't work. Akkad was the capital of the world's first empire, located somewhere in modern-day Iraq. 4,000 years ago, it was the most important city in the world, ruled by a king named Sargon the Great. Everyone knew where it was. It was the center of trade and power for over 100 years, but after the empire collapsed around 2150 BCE, the city completely disappeared. Archaeologists have been looking for Akkad for over a century, and they haven't found a single thing. No walls, no foundations, nothing. We have thousands of clay tablets from other cities that talk about it, but the actual city is nowhere to be found. It's a ghost. Researchers have used satellites and ground radar all over the desert and still come up empty. And this isn't an Atlantis situation, by the way. Akkad is really believed to have existed. So for such an important city like this, a place that was written about in so much detail, that is pretty bizarre. But that's been the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.